Good morning, good people of purpose and power. I came to speak not just to your ears, but to your spirit. Because what I'm about to say is not noise. It is revelation. In a world where everyone is talking, tweeting, shouting, and broadcasting, the secret to your next level is silence. In a world obsessed with visibility, noise, and self-promotion, silence has become a misunderstood force. But those who have truly walked in authority know something the crowd has not yet discovered. Silence is not a sign of absence. It is a dimension of presence. It is in silence that kingdoms are formed, legacies are born, and destiny is cultivated. The power of silence is not in what it withholds, but in what it prepares. Think about it, the greatest inventions, the most profound strategies, and the deepest revelations did not come through chaos or shouting. They were born in silence. They came when someone sat still long enough to think without distraction, to listen without interruption, and to imagine without boundaries. Silence is where clarity meets strategy. It is where intention aligns with execution. And it is where vision becomes reality. Just because a person is not speaking doesn't mean they are not moving. Still waters run deep, and the quiet soul often carries the heaviest revelation. We have been conditioned to equate noise with power. But real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. Silence is power under control. It is the kind of strength that knows when to move, when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. It's a self-mastery that few ever develop, but those who do shape nations and shift atmospheres. When a person learns the discipline of silence, they enter into a realm of inner authority. They no longer react impulsively or respond to every voice around them. They begin to move from a place of internal order, rather than external pressure. This is why silence is strategic. It allows you to protect your peace while sharpening your perception. You see clearer, you hear deeper, and you act wiser. Most people underestimate silence because it doesn't draw attention. But that's the point. It doesn't need attention to be effective. Silence is the posture of those who are too focused on becoming to waste time explaining. When you're quiet, you stop broadcasting your process and start building your power. You're not giving your adversaries ammunition. You're not feeding the doubts of others. You're simply aligning with your purpose in private so that your public presentation will carry undeniable weight. Look around. The people who've made the biggest difference were rarely the ones who talked the most. They were the ones who used silence as a weapon. They were deliberate, calculated, focused. While others were making noise, they were making moves. While others were reacting, they were strategizing. Because they understood a timeless principle: noise gets attention, but silence gets results. There's something about silence that intimidates small minds. When you're silent, people project their assumptions onto you. They wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, and what you're becoming. That's why silence is not just powerful, it's unpredictable. And unpredictability is a form of control. When you're silent, you don't give others the advantage of knowing your next step. You create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you reclaim your authority. Even in spiritual terms, silence is a prophetic tool. The Creator didn't shout the universe into existence. He simply spoke. And before he spoke, there was silence. Because silence is the womb of creation. Everything you see began in the unseen, and silence guards that sacred place. The invisible realms of purpose, destiny, and transformation are not accessed through noise, but through stillness. This is why people who are always talking rarely evolve. They fill the air with words, but produce no fruit. But those who enter the chamber of silence begin to hear divine instruction. They begin to see with new eyes, and they start to move in ways that confound human understanding. Silence is also a filter. It separates what's important from what's urgent. It allows you to sort through the chaos and hear the still small voice that carries your next instruction. It teaches you to respond rather than react. It empowers you to operate from wisdom rather than emotion. In silence, you gain insight, not just information. You develop discernment, not just data. And you begin to recognize what others overlook, because you've trained yourself to look beyond the obvious. That's why strategic people often seem quiet. It's not that they don't have opinions. It's not that they're passive. It's that they understand the timing of expression. There's a time to speak and a time to be silent. And many of life's failures come from speaking when you should be listening, or exposing when you should be covering. Silence teaches you restraint. It disciplines your ego. It breaks your addiction to validation. And it prepares you for the weight of the destiny you've been called to carry. It's important to understand that silence doesn't mean inactivity. There is a difference between being passive and being patient. Silence, when rooted in wisdom, is an active waiting, a focused stillness, a purposeful pause. You may not be saying much, but you're growing. You may not be posting online, but you're positioning. You may not be seeking attention, but you're cultivating something that will be undeniable when it manifests. And this is what separates people who make noise from people who make impact. Noise fills the air. Impact fills the earth. Noise passes quickly. Impact echoes through generations. And silence is the hidden ingredient that connects vision to legacy. Because in silence you begin to master the most important voice, your own. You stop being swayed by the trends and start anchoring yourself in timeless truth. You stop reacting to distractions and start responding to purpose. There are moments in life when silence is not optional. It's necessary. You need silence to grieve. You need silence to heal. You need silence to imagine something new when everything old has crumbled. Silence gives your soul the room to breathe and your mind the clarity to reset. Some doors won't open until you stop talking. Some solutions won't reveal themselves until you stop forcing them. And some battles are not won by raising your voice, but by stilling your spirit. Silence is how you take your power back in a noisy world. It is how you protect the seed before it becomes a tree. It is how you separate your essence from your image and make sure that what you're building is authentic, not just aesthetic. And when you embrace silence, you start to notice how much of your old life was just performance, how much of your talking was just a defense mechanism, and how much more powerful you become when you no longer need to explain, prove, or defend. You begin to see that silence is not absence. It is alignment. It is not passive. It is preparation. It is not quiet. It is strategic. Because in silence, you're not avoiding the world. You're tuning into a higher frequency. One that doesn't speak in volume, but in vibration. One that doesn't need noise, but needs you. Present, focused, surrendered, and ready. You don't bring your destiny to pass by shouting into the atmosphere. You align your heart, your mind, and your spirit in stillness with the unseen. We live in a generation that has been deceived into believing that volume equals value, that the louder you are, the more powerful your life becomes. But the truth is, manifestation has never been about noise. It has always been about alignment. True manifestation is the unfolding of internal truth into external reality. It is not about forcing outcomes. It is about becoming the person who naturally attracts what already belongs to them in the spirit. You can scream declarations from a mountaintop, but if your inner world is in chaos, nothing will shift. Destiny does not respond to noise, it responds to order. You don't manifest by echoing empty affirmations while your soul is in disorder. You manifest by harmonizing your beliefs, your thoughts, and your emotions with a higher vision of who you were created to be. And that requires quietness, not clamor. Stillness, not striving. The law of manifestation doesn't operate by pressure, it operates by positioning. Until your internal life reflects the same truth as your spoken word, your results will remain inconsistent. You can speak about wealth, success, and destiny all day long, but if there is resistance, self-doubt, fear, or confusion on the inside, those declarations will be short-circuited. The mouth cannot override the misalignment of the heart. What you declare must first be digested by your spirit. Alignment begins with integrity, internal unity. It means that what you believe, what you speak, and what you do are all synchronized. That's the place where faith becomes action and intention becomes reality. When your thoughts match your beliefs and your beliefs shape your behavior, you step into creative flow. You stop chasing things and things begin to respond to you. That's the power of internal alignment. People often get frustrated when their affirmations don't work, their goals don't manifest, and their vision boards stay stagnant. But manifestation isn't about magic. It's about identity. You can't manifest a future that your current identity is rejecting. You must become the person that your desired reality requires. And that becoming doesn't happen in public spaces of performance. It happens in private spaces of realignment. The spirit realm doesn't respond to noise. It responds to energy. Energy is not what you say, but what you carry. If your vibration is rooted in anxiety, doubt, or neediness, even the most powerful words won't break through. But when your spirit is aligned in faith, peace, and surrender, you can whisper a word, and it will carry the force of creation. The authority is not in the tone. It's in the truth behind the tone. That's why stillness is essential. It's in stillness that you confront your inner dissonance. It's in silence that you listen to the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. You stop performing for the world and you start preparing for destiny. You begin to align not just your goals, but your being. You ask yourself, do I truly believe I deserve this? Is my identity aligned with my confession? Is my heart in agreement with my intention? If the answer is no, then you don't need more affirmations, you need more alignment. Alignment is what gives your words weight. It's what gives your prayers power. When your heart, mind, and spirit are moving in the same direction, you become a magnet for the miraculous. You become the embodiment of your vision. And manifestation becomes inevitable. External noise often masks internal void. The louder the noise, the deeper the misalignment. When you see people over-explaining, over-posting, over-sharing, it's often a sign they are compensating for something unsettled within. But when you're aligned, you move differently. You don't need to convince others because you're already convinced within yourself. You don't need to fight for opportunities because you become the opportunity. You don't chase the door, you become the key. The greatest manifestations don't happen when you talk more. They happen when you believe deeper. When your inner atmosphere is peaceful, the outer world begins to mirror that peace. When your internal script is clear, life begins to align with your expectations. But you must first do the internal work of tuning your mind to the frequency of your faith, tuning your heart to the rhythm of your future, tuning your emotions to the language of surrender and trust. This is why rushing doesn't help. Anxiety is misalignment. Desperation is misalignment. When you're truly aligned, you don't chase, you attract. You don't stress, you flow. You don't strive, you rest. And from that rest, things begin to manifest not through your force, but through your faith. Every great person you admire, from spiritual leaders to visionary thinkers, didn't manifest greatness because they shouted it louder. They manifested it because they cultivated alignment. They became so inwardly aligned with their purpose that their outer world adjusted to accommodate their inner reality. They didn't fake it. They formed it day by day in quiet conviction and inner clarity. And that is the same principle available to you. When you stop making noise and start aligning, you'll stop asking, when will it happen? And start declaring, it's already done. Because manifestation isn't about making something happen out there. It's about awakening what already exists in here. And when the inside matches the intention, the outside will catch up without resistance. So silence is not a lack of faith. It is the evidence of faith. It is the stillness that proves you trust what you cannot yet see. It is the alignment that tells the universe and heaven itself, I am ready. Silence positions you to hear, perceive, and obey divine instruction. What you do in stillness commands what happens in public. In the realm of spiritual authority, influence is not attained by force, flattery, or performance. It is stewarded through intimacy. And intimacy is not achieved in crowds or chaos. It is cultivated in quietness. Heaven is not impressed by our religious routines, long-winded speeches, or dramatic displays of devotion. It responds to the meditative heart, the one that listens more than it speaks, surrenders more than it strives, and waits more than it worries. There is a sacred dimension of power that cannot be accessed through manipulation. You cannot twist the hand of God by emotional appeal, nor can you provoke divine favor through outward dramatics. What unlocks heaven is alignment through meditation. Meditation is not about repeating phrases. It is about entering into a divine rhythm of stillness, reflection, and spiritual awareness. It is the process of tuning your inner life to the frequency of God's instruction and allowing that frequency to shape your decisions, your behavior, and your outcomes. Too many people treat prayer like negotiation, trying to persuade heaven to agree with their agenda. But heaven is not moved by the demands of the flesh. It is moved by the alignment of the spirit. Meditation is how you enter into agreement with what heaven has already declared. It's not about changing God's mind. It's about changing yours to match His will. When you meditate, you shift from performing for God to partnering with Him. You move from manipulating outcomes to manifesting obedience. Silence is where this process begins. In silence, you are not trying to impress anyone. You are not striving to be heard. You are simply positioning yourself to hear. That is the posture heaven responds to. The ear that is open. The heart that is surrendered. The mind that is uncluttered. This is why meditation was never meant to be mystical or merely therapeutic. It was always spiritual. Because it is in that place of intentional stillness that divine strategy is released. Great moves of God in Scripture were never preceded by public displays. They were preceded by private encounters. Moses didn't receive instruction on the mountaintop in a crowd, but in isolation. Elijah didn't hear God in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a still small voice. Jesus withdrew off into solitary places to pray, not to persuade the Father, but to stay aligned with His assignment. These were not manipulative moments. They were meditative postures. And the power they released shook nations, healed bodies, raised the dead, and birthed movements. Your most powerful instructions won't come in the noise of public life. They will come in the silence of personal consecration. You can preach in front of thousands and still miss what heaven was trying to whisper to you in your bedroom. You can lead a business, a family, or a ministry, but if you are not meditating, if you are not still enough to hear, you are operating in your own strength. And what you birth in the flesh, you will have to sustain in the flesh. But what you receive in the Spirit, heaven will sustain. This is why so many people are burned out. They are manipulating instead of meditating. They are forcing things into being, trying to manufacture success through control, pressure, and performance. But the fruit of manipulation is always temporary. It may look impressive, but it is fragile. It lacks the roots that come from time spent in silence before God. Meditation builds those roots. It plants your confidence in the unseen, so that when storms come, your foundation holds. Your clarity remains. Your instruction stands. In the presence of divine instruction, chaos loses its grip, anxiety dissolves, confusion lifts, because the voice of God brings order. And meditation is the portal through which that voice speaks. But you cannot hear that voice if your life is too loud, if your days are dominated by distractions, if your decisions are reactive instead of reflective. Silence becomes the sacred boundary that protects your mind from the world long enough to enter into the atmosphere of the kingdom. What happens in that atmosphere cannot be described by human logic. Ideas are born, identities are restored, assignments are clarified, peace returns. And most importantly, obedience becomes possible. Because when you meditate, you don't just receive information, you receive instruction. You gain insight that directs your next move, shapes your next conversation, and guides your next step. And when you act on what you receive in stillness, your public life begins to reflect divine authority. This is the secret behind true spiritual impact. It's not charisma, it's clarity. It's not how well you speak, it's how well you hear. When you've heard from heaven in the secret place, you can speak with confidence in the public space. Because you're no longer guessing, you're executing. You're no longer reacting, you're releasing. And your words carry weight because they are backed by divine instruction. That's what separates noise from authority. Many speak loudly, but few speak with the power of heaven. That power does not come from being articulate. It comes from being aligned. It is the fruit of meditation, the result of obedience, and the reward of silence. So silence becomes your strategy, not because you are weak, but because you are listening. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you want to say only what heaven is saying. Not because you fear man, but because you fear missing the voice of God. In that sacred stillness, you exchange manipulation for meditation, striving for surrender and pressure for power. And then without striving, without explaining, without pushing, your life begins to command public outcomes that others cannot explain. Because what you do in silence determines what heaven will do in your midst. Lions don't roar when they're hunting. They move silently and strike effectively. So must you. In every dimension of life, whether spiritual, professional, or personal, those who carry real authority do not feel the need to constantly broadcast their power. They don't move to be seen. They don't speak to be validated. They understand that true dominion does not demand attention, it commands results. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful. In fact, in many cases, excessive noise is a cover for internal doubt, fear, and the need for external confirmation. But silence, when it flows from confidence and clarity, is the clearest expression of dominion. There is something deeply revealing about the way people use their voice. The insecure constantly talk because silence confronts them with themselves. They need the noise to fill the space where their identity hasn't yet matured. They fill the air with opinions, status updates, public declarations, and emotional outbursts because deep within, they are uncertain about who they are and where they are going. But those who walk in dominion are not driven by insecurity, they are led by purpose. They have nothing to prove, no need to announce, and no fear of being unseen. Look at nature's most dominant creatures. The lion, known as the king of the jungle, does not roar to catch its prey. It roars to mark its territory after the fact, not before. But when it hunts, it is strategic, it is quiet, it is focused. There is no wasted movement, no unnecessary noise, just calculated stillness followed by explosive action. This is the model of dominion. You don't win battles by shouting louder, you win by positioning smarter. You don't move in noise, you move in wisdom. You don't draw attention to yourself, you let the result reveal your presence. Silence in this context is not avoidance. It is intentional positioning. It is the ability to withhold your power until the right moment, and when that moment comes, to strike with precision. The spiritually mature don't expose everything. They don't post every plan. They don't defend every criticism, because they understand the power of restraint, and restraint is one of the clearest signs of royalty. A true king doesn't argue with peasants. He doesn't explain his moves to those outside his court. He sits in the weight of his authority and acts when necessary. The same applies to those who walk in spiritual dominion. They are not constantly speaking because they are constantly listening. They are not trying to impress others because they are already aligned with their assignment. Their silence is not indifference. It is discernment. It is the understanding that every move doesn't need a monologue. Every decision doesn't need a defense. Every season doesn't need an announcement. When you walk with divine strategy, your effectiveness speaks for you. Your fruit is your voice, and your impact becomes your introduction. Many people ruin divine opportunities because they cannot master silence. They reveal their hand too early. They speak out of turn. They rush to defend what God intended to hide. And in doing so, they forfeit the strength of strategic stillness. But those who walk in dominion know that some of their greatest victories will never be seen in public. They are won in silence, behind closed doors, before an audience of one. Silence also protects the sacred. Not everything is meant for public consumption. Some visions, dreams, strategies, and revelations are for the secret place. And when you carry something valuable, you don't parade it, you protect it. The loudness of exposure can weaken the purity of your purpose. But when you keep things close, nurtured in silence, protected by wisdom, and guided by discernment, you give them space to grow into something that cannot be denied. This is why dominion is quiet, because it's never threatened. It doesn't fear the success of others. It doesn't compete for recognition. It doesn't overcompensate. Dominion knows that timing is everything, and that premature exposure can sabotage long-term elevation. So it waits, it watches, it listens, it prepares. And when the right moment arrives, it acts with such authority that no noise is needed to explain it. You must begin to see silence as a shield and a sword. It shields you from unnecessary battles, and it sharpens your spirit for the real ones. It teaches you the rhythm of restraint. It cultivates within you the discipline of discernment. And it positions you to move in ways that confuse the enemy. Because while others are predicting your next move based on your noise, you've already shifted in silence. You don't need to roar to prove you're a lion. Your posture, your eyes, your focus, your quiet movement, they reveal who you are without a word. So must you be in your spiritual walk. Let the world underestimate you. Let them wonder what you're up to. Let them believe the silence means nothing is happening. But you know what's growing. You know what's aligning. You know what's being sharpened in the secret place. This is dominion. It's not just about power. It's about controlled power. It's about the ability to speak and the wisdom to stay silent. It's about knowing when to strike and when to wait. It's about understanding that your authority is not in how loud you are, but in how aligned you are. When heaven backs you, silence becomes louder than shouting. When purpose drives you, stillness becomes more powerful than striving. So if you're in a silent season, don't mistake it for weakness. You're not being ignored. You're being equipped. You're not being developed. And when your time comes, you won't need to announce it. Your fruit will speak for you. Your excellence will testify. Your presence will shift rooms. And like the lion in the wild, your silent preparation will produce a strike no one saw coming, but no one will forget. The most powerful seasons of your life will not be declared. They will be discovered when your fruit speaks louder than your lips. In a world driven by the obsession to be seen, to be noticed, to be celebrated before anything has been truly cultivated, this truth stands like a pillar in the midst of noise. God's greatest works in your life often begin in secret, and the things He is forming within you are not designed to be broadcast prematurely. When something is truly divine in origin, it does not require announcement. It carries its own evidence. You must understand that heaven doesn't work on social media timelines. God doesn't need your updates or public declarations to fulfill what He has spoken in private. When you begin to walk with Him in maturity, you'll discover a shift. Your announcements decrease, and your obedience increases. You begin to walk quietly but purposefully. You don't need to tell anyone what's about to happen, because the process itself is sacred, and God is still shaping the parts of you that the public has no business witnessing. There is a level of spiritual authority that refuses to be rushed. And when you reach that level, you become content with being hidden. You don't run ahead of revelation trying to impress people with a promise that hasn't matured. You don't post every vision or explain every decision. You allow the fruit to do the talking. Because the fruit of your life, the undeniable results, the visible transformation, the unmistakable grace, will speak volumes more than your declarations ever could. So many destinies are disrupted because people announce what should be protected. When the Spirit of God begins to move in your life, He often starts with the private, the quiet, the internal. He reshapes your mind, rewrites your values, reorganizes your priorities. It's invisible to the eye, but monumental in the spirit. And if you reveal it too soon, you expose what isn't yet ready. You invite unnecessary warfare. You attract critics, doubters, and voices that plant seeds of fear and sabotage what's still in its formation stage. When a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't shout to the world, "My harvest is coming." Every single day, he trusts the process. He waters in silence. He waits in patience. And then, when the season shifts, the ground breaks open and something living, visible, and fruitful emerges. That's how God works with you. He doesn't need you to explain what He's about to do. He needs you to trust it, prepare for it, and steward it without leaking it. The most powerful seasons of your life will begin in such obscurity that even you may wonder if anything is happening at all. But in that quietness, things are growing. The roots are deepening. The soil is shifting. The foundation is being laid for a kind of manifestation that doesn't need a stage to be recognized. It simply is. And when it arrives, it commands attention, not through noise, but through undeniable evidence. There's something about fruit that shuts every critic's mouth. You don't need to defend a tree that's bearing fruit. You don't need to argue about your growth when it's obvious. That's why Jesus said, "You will know them by their fruit," not by their words, not by their noise, not by their marketing, but by the visible, measurable, tangible outpouring of what they have allowed God to cultivate within them. So be at peace in your hidden season. You're not being overlooked, you're being prepared. You're not behind, you're being built. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. When God finishes shaping what He started in you, the reveal won't need your help. It will carry such glory, such weight, and such clarity that people will look and say, "Surely the hand of God is upon them." You won't have to post it, promote it, or defend it. It will speak for itself. When the time is right, God will lift the curtain. He will open the door. He will shine the light. But it won't be a performance. It will be a divine unveiling. You will walk into rooms you never campaigned for. You will be handed assignments you never applied for. You will be given access that no one can explain, because the fruit will be your advocate. The anointing will be your proof, and the favor of God will speak on your behalf louder than your lips ever could. So resist the urge to rush revelation. Resist the temptation to broadcast a destiny that's still being born. Instead, remain rooted, remain submitted, remain silent when needed. Let your actions align with the promise. Let your posture reflect your trust. And when the appointed time comes, you will not have to say a word. Your fruit will reveal everything. The womb of manifestation is found in the still, sacred place where you believe without evidence and move without applause. Faith is not always loud. It doesn't always shout. It doesn't always make declarations that shake rooms or generate viral moments. The most potent kind of faith is often invisible to the crowd but undeniable to heaven. It is quiet. It is internal. It is rooted in surrender and trust, not performance and visibility. Faith reaches its purest form not in the noise of celebration, but in the silence of commitment. When you keep believing, even when no one is watching, when nothing seems to be changing, and when the world offers no confirmation. We often associate faith with noise because we've confused inspiration with transformation. But inspiration is momentary. Transformation is sustained in silence. Faith is the bridge between what God said and what your eyes cannot yet see, and that bridge is built step by step, quietly, obediently, consistently. In fact, the most sacred acts of faith are often unnoticed. They happen when you choose to keep walking in the dark, to keep sowing when the soil looks barren, to keep loving when the return is empty, to keep building when no one validates your effort. Why does faith thrive in quietness? Because faith isn't a performance, it's a position. It is a posture of trust when logic has run out. It is the decision to move when you have no map. It is the strength to keep going when the applause has faded and the spotlight is gone. When you strip away the affirmation, the recognition, the emotional support, what remains is the raw core of faith. Not hope, not hype, faith. And God meets you there, not in the volume of your voice, but in the silence of your surrender. The womb of manifestation is not a platform. It is a hidden place. Just like a child is formed in the concealed space of the womb, so too are your promises developed in the dark. You don't see the process, you only see the result. And that's how God works. He allows the growth to remain unseen, to test your trust. Because real faith doesn't need evidence to continue. It creates evidence by refusing to quit. When you truly walk by faith, you'll go through seasons that silence every outside voice, because God wants to see if you'll still follow His without confirmation. You'll find yourself giving when no one is grateful, serving when no one claps, praying when no one joins you, and believing when everyone else has walked away. And in those moments, the foundation of your faith is forged, not in conferences or crowds, but in quiet mornings, tearful prayers, and hidden obedience. Faith is most powerful when it no longer needs reassurance, when you're no longer looking for signs to keep going, but have resolved in your spirit that what God promised is already yours. That kind of faith moves mountains, not because it yells at the mountain, but because it refuses to be moved by it. Quiet faith doesn't panic. Quiet faith doesn't rush. Quiet faith knows that what's planted will come forth, not because of emotion, but because of truth. And this is the kind of faith that the enemy fears. Not loud, dramatic faith, but steady, unshakable faith. The faith that doesn't flinch when time passes. The faith that doesn't shrink when storms come. The faith that says, even here, even now, even if, I will still believe. That's the kind of faith that births the miraculous. That's the kind of faith that invites heaven to intervene. Many miss the moment of manifestation because they despise the silence. They want the crowd, they want the confirmation. But the womb is not noisy. The womb is still. It is quiet. It is covered. And only those who can survive the silence will carry the promise. Only those who can worship in the waiting, praise in the pain, and trust in the trial will see the promise birthed through them. You must learn to value the quiet place, because that's where you are stretched. That's where your motives are purified. That's where your faith is refined. That's where your identity is rooted, not in what you do for God, but in who you believe He is when there's no sign, no sound, and no applause. The quiet place teaches you to depend on His voice above your feelings. It teaches you to believe His promise more than your environment. It teaches you to walk by truth, not by sight. The world celebrates visibility, but heaven honors invisibility. God honors the faith that shows up without attention, the kind that gives without being praised, the kind that obeys without needing proof. That's the faith that touches eternity. That's the faith that births destiny. And that's the faith that brings heaven to earth. So when you find yourself in the quiet, lean into it. Don't fight it. Don't rush it. That silence is sacred. It's not a punishment, it's preparation. It's not delay, it's development. Something holy is being formed in the unseen. And your only assignment is to keep believing, keep moving, keep trusting, even when no one else sees it. Because faith works best in quiet places. Not because God is hiding from you, but because He's building something within you that will be revealed in His perfect time. My brothers and sisters, let me say this to your spirit. You were never designed to chase attention. You were born to carry authority. And true authority does not make noise, it makes impact. The quiet soul is not empty. It is full of divine strategy, full of purpose, full of the power of the kingdom. When you understand the value of silence, you stop trying to convince people of who you are, and you begin to become who God said you are. You stop announcing what you're about to do, and you start producing fruit that no one can deny. Because in the kingdom of God, fruit speaks louder than followers. Obedience is more powerful than applause, and hiddenness is not punishment. It is preparation. Listen carefully. Heaven does not respond to emotional noise, but to spiritual alignment. Your destiny is not manifested by manipulation, but by meditation. Your calling is not activated by crowd approval, but by private submission to divine instruction. And when you move in silence, heaven moves with you. Don't be afraid of the quiet. Don't despise the stillness. That is where kings are forged. That is where leaders are formed. That is where vision is birthed, purpose is refined, and destiny is revealed. So I charge you, withdraw from the noise. Retreat into the presence. Learn to hear in silence. Learn to move without announcing. And when God is ready to reveal what He has deposited in you, your emergence will not require a microphone, because your manifestation will be your message. Let your silence carry the sound of dominion. Let your fruit speak for your faith. And let your life be the evidence that heaven has touched earth. The greatest moves of God begin in silence. and so will yours.